So today I want to talk about mana curves, what they are, how they affect your deck, why you should care about them, and also how to make your deck more consistent because of them, and how consistency doesn't mean power. So yeah, let's dive into this. So what is your mana curve? Your mana curve is all your cards organized by their CMC, their converted mana cost, or their mana value. Yeah, CMC, converted mana cost, MV, mana value. So all your 1 drops together, 2 drops together, 3 drops together, etc. You do that for your entirety of deck, and you will create this plot, yeah? And it should form a curve, hence the name mana curve. It will look a bit stacky, like a bar chart type thing, but if you imagined you plot it on a graph and then you drew an average line between them all, you'd make a nice curve. Why is this important? It's important because when you're playing a game of Commander or an EGH or even Magic in general, you want to make sure you can cast things in the early game, so you have spells that cost 1 or 2 mana. And then in the mid game, you've got spells that cast 3, 4, and 5 mana. And in the late game, you've got spells that cast 6, 7, 8 mana. Yeah, and as we all know, cards are powered differently depending on their mana value. That's one of the ways they use to scale the power of cards. Like normally, if a card costs a lot of mana, it does something bigger, splashier, more impactful, and it will have more dramatic impact when it enters the battlefield. Yeah, versus something that's, say, smaller on the mana side of things, maybe it's slightly weaker on its own, but then has synergies with other things. That's how they balance cards. So we want to make sure we can cast stuff in the early game, mid game, and late game. If we have, say, a mana curve, and it's got like a few 1 drops, 2 drops, but then it's got loads of 4, 5, 6 drops, what we might find is we're drawing into those cards early in the game, and we can't actually cast the little stuff because we're drawing too much of the big stuff. Yeah? So, and if we flip that argument on its side, if we have too much of the little stuff, the 1s and the 2s, when we get into the late game, because we've survived the early game because we've got plenty of cheap effective creatures on the battlefield, when we start getting into turns 6, 7, 8, we've still only got little things, and then when our opponents start to play bigger things with trample and more keywords and flying and evasion and stuff like that, our little guys aren't going to hold their own against that. So yeah, so this is why we need a balanced curve, and this changes depending on your strategy of where your peak in your curve lies. So I can't talk about mana curves without talking about resource management, yeah? Magic the Gathering is a game of resource management. In Commander, we have access to a lot of lands, a lot of mana, yeah? People know to cast land ramp spells, they know to play their talismans, their signets, all that type of stuff, and to ramp to they can cast bigger things earlier on in the game. Everybody knows that, it's a common fact. Awesome stuff, yeah? So what we need to make sure we're doing is we are using all of our mana before our next turn. So if you play something on turn 1, you've used your mana, awesome stuff. If you've not played anything on turn 1 and it cuts all the way around to your turn, you've wasted a mana, yeah, or mana that's not been used, yeah. Obviously, everybody else is playing and doing their thing, so we've got to take into account, say you don't cast anything on turn 1, but all 3 of your opponents all play a 1 drop. On turn 2, you play a 2 drop. Then all your opponents play 2 drops. Then you get to turn 3, you take another turn off. They all play 3 drops. Gets to turn 4, finally you play a 4 drop, and all your opponents play 4 drops. Yeah, you can see how quickly this starts to snowball. Yeah, it's noticeable in a 1v1 game, but in a Commander game, it's even more noticeable. And this is why sometimes we're led to situations where somebody gets ahead so much, and they also become like the arch enemy, yeah, the number 1 player at the table to go against, and everybody combines against them. Because they've just been so effective with their resource management. They've managed to cast 1 drops, 2 drops, 3 drops, 4 drops, use all their resources available every turn. Now, this sometimes means as well when you're using your resources, you don't necessarily need to develop your board state every turn, but you could deny other people their resources. So say you get to turn 1, you do a land, say you do your magical soul ring into an arcane signet or something crazy like that. Then on turn 2, you play another land, you've got 5 mana, you could drop a 5 drop at this point. Maybe you do a 3 drop, you ramp, you cultivate, something like that, you know, and then you've got 2 blue mana left. Say you're in Simic colours, yeah? And then your opponents go around, somebody else is trying to do the same thing as you. You've now got that perfect counterspell magic to spend your mana, use all of your resources before your next turn, and also deny some of those people their resources, yeah? So this is where we start getting into that, using your resources to advance your board state and also deny other people their resources. And this is important because obviously with a mana curve and being able to cast consistently multiple spells on each turn and be able to cast 1 drops on turn 1, 2 drops on turn 2, things like that, and use all of our resources, we are going to put ourselves ahead of our opponents. And in Commander, we have 3 opponents. It's not 1v1, it's 1v3. So this is so crucial. So I want to take a moment to talk about what I just said, consistency, yeah? That word consistency, a lot of people assume means, oh, you're taking it to the nth level, you're going to high power tables. Yeah, that's not the case at all. You can have a fun and quirky deck that can consistently do its thing. It can repeat that motion of doing stuff without it being overbearing and powerful and dominate games. Yeah, and that's what a solid mana curve allows us to bring to the table within our deck building. Yeah, it allows us to make sure we can consistently do what our deck wants to do. We can find the right cards within our deck to do what we need to do in order to have fun and do what we want our decks to do. Okay, let's stop talking about mana curves and show you some mana curves. This is my Merrin of Clan Nel Toth deck. I would definitely say it's one of my stronger decks. It's running 39 lands, so 37 lands and then 39 including MDFCs. When I play this, I just want to make a note about these lands. I treat those MDFCs as lands first. If I'm sat with an MDFC in hand and I've not played a land per turn, I'm going to play it as a land. Yeah, I'm going to make sure I get a land down every turn. Yeah, if that means I'm denying removing something of my opponent's, then I have to make a decision on, can that threat down the board or important for me to develop my game plan? Yeah, so I have to weigh that up. So the dark purple bars are your permanents, your creatures, your artifacts, your enchantments, everything like that. And then the top cards are your instants and sorceries, your spells. So yeah, we can see here we've got 11 1-drops, and then we've got what? 2-drops, same again, 3-drops, then 4s, 5s, and 6. So 6 drops is the highest. This is something I know quite well within my Merrin deck, so I know once I get Merrin to 6 experience, I don't really have to worry about tracking it anymore, unless somebody gets removes it, because 6 guarantees me to reanimate anything in my deck, which is Mikaeus, Massacre Worm, and Dreadhound. And thanks to the new Demonic Council, I can now tutor for Dreadhound straight away. So yeah, this is an example of being able to do things consistently on each of your turns. And if we look here, my average mana value of my deck is 2.82. So if I want to do multiple things on my turns, I need to make sure I get to 6 mana as quickly as possible. Also notice how that ties in. 6 mana means I can cast my big game winning pieces. Yeah? See that synergy that's built into these decks. Yeah? When I can double spell, I can also play my game ending things. Yeah? Mikaeus Unhallowed is my combo piece within deck. Massacre Worm allows me to wipe the opponent's creatures, they lose a bunch of life, they die. Dreadhound is a second Sir Conrad effect. Yeah? So when we build a consistent mana curve, we can look at these little details and make sure our deck packs a punch before we've even played any cards. So here we have another deck. This deck's quite interesting. It's my Diner Here Zerda deck, so every permanent has an activated ability and Diner lets me copy that ability, as long as it costs 4 or more mana. So I'm running 38 lands, and then I am running a massive 34 artifacts. Most of these are artifact ramp. I am in Jeskai colours, so therefore I am ramping through artifacts to get ahead as quickly as possible. I have little things like Weather's Wayfarer in there and stuff like that, and Burnished Hearts to enable me to get land drops, but for the most part I'm using talismans and signets, stones and lockets, etc. for me to ramp and get ahead. So let's look at the mana curve. We have a bunch of 1-drops, 2-drops, 3-drops, obviously loads and loads of 2-drops. This is because I want to make sure that when I get on turn 2, I am playing a 2-drop. Yeah, which means on turn 3, I am ramping. I am on 4 mana on turn 3, yeah? Because I've used that 2 mana artifact ramp. That means on turn 3, maybe if I've got 2 more 2 pieces of artifact ramp in my hand, I can accelerate even quicker, yeah? So on turn 4, I'm now on 6 mana. Yeah, this means I can cast my commander and then also maybe play a creature or get some other form of presence on the board. Yeah, so on turn 5 I can start copying and activating abilities and going off and doing what I want to do. Also, I want to point out once again the synergies within the deck. 2.87 without lands, so about a 3 mana average mana value for this deck. Yeah, I have loads and loads of 2-drop, I have 3-drops and 4-drops to ramp. Yeah. And also, if we look at my creatures, something like Triskaidekaphal, 2 mana, then 4 mana to activate. I want to be able to play this and activate its ability to get the benefit from it straight away. That's 6 mana. Time Stream Navigator, that's 6 mana. Yeah? Reality Chip, 2 mana, 3 mana to equip. Yeah? That's 5 mana. I need to make sure I can have that. Yeah? Burnished Heart, that's 6 mana. Yeah? Emery, Lurk of the Lot, 3 mana to cast it and then cast something from my graveyard. I want to be able to cast any of this stuff from my graveyard. It's probably going to be about 6 mana. Yeah? So you see, once again, these synergies building up so you can consistently do what you want to do. Whether it's something janky like this, of turning your opponent's stuff into artifacts to steal them with Memnock, or start snowballing out of control sacrifice synergies in Merrin. So the next thing we need to make a point of looking at is our instant and sorceries, our spells versus permanent ratio. As you'll have seen in the Merrin example I gave, I can cast instants and sorceries across the entirety of the mana curve except for my 6-drops, because my 6-drops are my game ending pieces. Yeah, same with my Dynaheir deck. I can cast instants and sorcery spells across all of it, apart from my 7 mana spell, which is Memnock, and then my 2 mana spells, which is all artifact ramp, because those are the 2 things I want to be doing at those mana points. At any other point, I can be casting instant sorceries and interacting with my opponents. Yeah, so we've got to have a healthy balance between permanents and spells, and that also has to align with when you want to be doing that within your game plan. Now, with all this said and done, we need to talk about adaptability. You don't want to be a mindless robot that's just going through and doing X, Y, and Z every game on every point of the turn cycle. Yes, you want to be maybe consistently ramping on turn 2 to cast your commander on turn 3, so on and so forth, but also you want to be making sure that you can cast, say, maybe a 3-drop and a 2-drop together. Yeah, you can cast a 1-drop and a 4-drop together. So you can mix up those things. Maybe you want to activate an ability of a creature or of a permanent, and then also be able to then spell off the back of that. Yeah, this all comes down to what your deck is doing, what type of deck you have, the synergies of your deck, what your commander wants to do. Yeah, but we need to have some element of flexibility. If we look at my Merrin deck, once again, as I'm using this as an example, I have quite a lot of 1-drops. I might not play them on turn 1, but it also means that maybe on turn 3, if I've not ramped on turn 2, I can then maybe play a 2-drop and a 1-drop. Yeah, it also means that if I draw a couple of them into the late game, maybe I want to play 3 or 4 of them and sacrifice them to use them as sacrifice fodder in the late game. Yeah, making sure I can use all of my resources that I've got on my turn to make sure I can keep progressing my board state and my game plan forward. Now, this is probably one of the most important pieces of information, and that is your land count. Yeah, there's a reason why I pointed out my land count earlier in my examples, and it's because it really, really matters. So, we want to be running enough lands to play a land drop every turn all the way up until that key point. So for me, in those 2 examples again, it was 6. Yeah, so you could see in Merrin, I was running 39 lands, including MDFCs, 39 lands. Turn 6, that gives me a 29.8% chance of making that land drop. That's just less than a 30% chance to make a land drop on turn 6. Yeah, not the best, but I have lots of ways to draw cards in that deck. I also have quite a few ways to ramp in that deck, so I make it quite easily. Yeah, if we look at my Dynaheir deck, I was running 38 lands. Turn 6, that's only a 27% chance, 27.21% chance to make my land drop on turn 6. But you see how much artifact ramp I'm throwing in that. So I'm definitely going to hit that 6 mana target. Yeah, if you're one of those people where you're running 34 or 33 lands, let's do 33 lands. On turn 6, there is a 15% chance you're going to make your land drop. If you're running a 6 mana commander and you're running 33 lands, like, without ramp, you ain't casting your commander. I'm sorry, but you're just not. Yeah, if we go all the way up to 42 lands, turn 6, it's only a 38.32% chance you're going to make your land drop on turn 6. So yeah, less than 40% chance to make your land drop on turn 6 with 42 lands in your deck. Yeah, this goes to show why ramp is so important, and also why land count matters so much. Yeah, there is no reason to be running a low land count now, especially with the amount of MDFCs that we've got. There's loads of MDFCs that are viable in lots and lots of different decks. Yeah, use them, but remember to treat them as lands, not as spells. Yeah, play lands. My advice is play more lands, people. I'm looking at you, Alex. So that's a whole load of information right there, so I'm just going to stop. Yeah, make sure, I guess at this point, you just take a look at your mana curve. Whether you do with anything or not is up to you, but just have a look at your mana curve. And if you feel the need and you feel the desire, then see where you can trim some fat and adjust things and move things around. If you want to be doing the big splashy things on the 7, 8, 9 mana type thing, make sure your early game can support that and do that, so you can have that fun and you can get what you want out of Commander. Yeah, the whole point of this is so we can consistently play games at the level that we want to play, not necessarily at the top CDH levels or the bottom 1 or 2 tier levels, but wherever you're playing. Yeah, we want to be able to consistently do what we want to do. Yeah, we don't want to sit down for an hour and have a non-game. Nobody wants to experience that. So yeah, take the time, look at your mana curve, you know, look at when you're casting your commander, look at where your ramp is located, look at how many high cost spells you are. If you're struggling to cut cards, maybe use your mana curve as a guide to be able to trim that fat. So yeah, if you made it this far in the video, please consider just dropping a comment down below, hitting that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up. That's all helped me out massively. Hitting that subscribe button is probably the biggest thing that could help this channel right now, so would appreciate that very much. And yeah, any questions, drop them down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye for now.